All right. So we did lab 1, 2, and then we did lab 4 last week. And then last week, like our 2 p.m. session, I recorded it. So in case you were absent last week, I posted the recording under the lab handout and slides. So you can watch it. And then please make sure to watch it, okay? Because if you watch that, it will help you with the chemistry part, will help you with the extra credit opportunities. And then the digestive system, obviously, it's going to help you review the structures so that you're ready for the exam, okay? Remember, the exam questions are labeling questions and identifying the structures, okay? And today we're gonna do lab 3. And then if you notice, like I kind of like switched the order, right? Like we're doing tissues, but we already started the digestive system, right? It's okay because the chemistry, the biochemistry part, it wasn't too long. And then digestive system is probably the easiest system that we're gonna cover. Actually, the integumentary system is also easy that we're gonna cover today, okay? So that's why these are combined with other labs. But after that, each week we're gonna do one lab, and then it's only gonna be body system, okay? So far, we've covered the body system on a cellular level, first chemical level, like atoms, right? And then we have the cellular level. We learned about the cell, the function of the cell, and everything about the cell, right? Like cell division, transcription, translation, all of that. And then today we're gonna learn the tissue level, the tissues, right? Because group of cells come together and make a tissue, right? And then group of tissues come together and make an organ, group of organs come together and make a body system. Group of body systems come together and they make up the organism, right? So today we're gonna do the tissues, and then after that, each week, we're just gonna do different body systems and also the organs, the structures that are part of that system, okay? So today we're gonna do the tissues and we're gonna start with the integumentary system, okay? And like I promised you last Wednesday, remember I said on Friday when the new module is published, I will also publish the following week's module. So right now we're in week 4, okay? And next week is week 5. And then after that, we have the lab exam, okay? Today we're gonna do lab 3. Next week we're gonna do lab 5, which is the bones, okay? And I don't want us to cover the bones next Wednesday, 2 p.m. And then after 1 week, the following Wednesday, 2 p.m., we have to come and take the exam, okay? Like, I don't know if that 1 week gives you enough time to like do all the bone stuff, the assignments, and to study and review labs 1 through 5 and be ready for the exam, okay? So that is why on Friday, this Friday, your this week's module and next week's module was published, okay? And in lecture, everyone, even though in lab, the bone is one lab, it's only lab 5, it has all the bones there. In lecture, bones is 4 chapters. It's composed of 4 chapters. I mean, it's again 1, but it's divided into 4, okay? Because the lab is one lab, but it's all the bones from the 4 chapters, okay? Basically, it's divided into, first, the one that we started this week is the bone tissues. And then, which we don't focus a lot in lab. You get like lecture questions on that. Maybe a little bit about the compact bone, spongy bone, not a lot. I want you to focus on the other 2 chapters. One is on the axial skeleton, and the other one is the appendicular skeleton. Okay? And it's mostly all of our bones, but it's just divided into axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Okay, and then the 4th chapter is on joints, the joints between the bones. Okay, and next week in lab, when we do lab 5, we are gonna cover a little bit of the bone tissues and then the whole axial skeleton, appendicular skeleton, and we're gonna cover the joints. And you know how we cover things in lab, like we're gonna go slide by slide. Probably you're gonna see the skull and the facial bones like so many times in different views, and we're gonna keep repeating the names of the bones where I want you to learn everything in class, okay? And after that, I want you to just like review and then keep doing the practice quizzes so that you're ready for the exam. The exam is 2 weeks from now, not next Wednesday, the Wednesday after that on labs 1 through 5, okay? And the exam is composed of 80 multiple choice questions, and it's all over 90% of the questions are images, just like the ones on Access Pearson. And I'm gonna show it to you again today. And you'll see the image, arrow pointing at a structure, and it's asking you to label the structure, and you have 4 choices or 5. I hope it's 4 because 4 is easier. Now I can't remember, but I will check it. On the exam or well, you haven't taken the exam yet. You mean the assignments? Assignments are 5, but I don't know if my exams are 4 or 5. So we'll see. Yeah. Yeah. And then actually Mia would know. Yeah. You can ask her. Yeah, she would know. Or I can check. Anyways, so that's what we have coming up, okay? And I know it seems like 80 questions are a lot, but some of those questions are like very easy and you can't miss those. Like, oh, this is the liver, this is the stomach, but there might be some like, for example, on the bones, there would be like easy ones, the radius, the ulna, the humerus, but which are things that those are like popular bones, right? We use it in our, I don't know, you encounter those more because these are like bones that we break or fracture, or you've seen them in Bio 5, but we're gonna go a little bit more into details where, you know how like, for example, the end of the bone where the humerus is attached to the radius or the ulna, there's like 5, 6 places there that we have to know the names, like the epicondyle and all that stuff, okay? So these might be new, but again, I will try to do my best so that in lab, we try to learn these bones as much as we can. Also, if you notice today, I gave out the Lab 5 handout to you. And can you please bring the Lab 5 handout with you next week so that I don't make copies again? Okay, thank you so much. The reason why I gave it out early, first, these handouts are your study guides. It has the questions for the labs, but you answer it on Canvas, and you're all familiar to that by now. But if you keep flipping the pages, you're gonna see that there are labeling bones pages where you have to label the bones. And then these labeling images and where it's asking you to label the bones, it's from the slides, from our lab slides. You know, you can label while we're going over it during lab, or you can have the slides open at home and then label it. This labeling is optional, but it's worth 10 points extra credit. Okay, so it's worth 10 points extra credit, and you would take a picture and turn it in on Canvas, okay? And then I'm giving it out to you early because, you know, if I give you next Wednesday, like which one are you gonna worry about? Completing the assignments, doing the extra credit, or studying labs 1 through 5 for the exam, okay? So, you know, like between today, tomorrow, I would say like just start labeling the bones. But first, watch the lecture videos, okay? All the bones lectures are posted. Just watch it. If you want, like while you're listening to me talk, because really the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton lecture videos, they're very similar to what we do in lab. I'm literally saying this is this bone, this is that bone, this is this one, this is that. Unlike the other chapters that we've been covering where I focus more on the concept, okay? So in lecture video, you would learn the bones like you would in lab, and then we'll do it again in lab next Wednesday, okay? So if you want, get the extra credit out of the way, watch the lecture videos, and then do those, and then come like more prepared next Wednesday so that, you know, reviewing it in class, it will help you even further. And then that last week, like 1 week before the exam, you can review the older labs and do those practice quizzes on Access Pearson, okay? And then next week, I'll talk more about like more specifics about the exam, like once I finalized it, you know, and then if I can help you by saying focus on this part more or on that part more, I promise to do that, okay? But yeah, the exam is gonna be on Canvas, but we're gonna take it here in class. Is everyone comfortable bringing their electronic devices with them to class where you will access your exam? And it looks like a Canvas quiz, okay, but it's your exam. And then you're gonna see pictures, and then you're going to basically identify the structures, okay? It's worked really well so far. There are instructors that are like setting up stations, and students have to go from one station to the other and all that. This way, everyone will take it at the same time. You'll have your own picture, and then you can take your time with each picture. The instructions might say it's timed, but it's not timed. We have 3 hours. Whenever you're done, you're done. And then I'll be walking around, and if you need help, if you're confused about anything, I'm here to help you, okay? And I'm here rooting for you to do really well on the exam. All right, so yeah, it's 2 weeks from now, just so that you can start getting ready. Yeah, I would say start the bones. Today we're gonna do the tissues and the integumentary system, and then I promise by the end of class you're gonna have everything learned. Okay, so if you stay with me, participate and focus, we will learn this in class. Okay, and then you'll go home and start doing the bones, and then you just have to review this. Okay, all right. Any questions? Yes. I will check the schedule if I'm starting the next lab, but if not, then after the exam, everyone can leave. Yeah, but I'll answer that next week. Let me check the schedule. Okay, because one time I let the students go and I was supposed to start something because I had a conference one of the Wednesdays. I was not supposed to let that happen. So I'm not gonna say anything. I'll confirm it next week or the end of class. I'll check it, okay? Yeah. The week after the lab exam, we have the lecture exam. The lecture exam, we take it here in lab, like at 2 p.m. Usually 3:15 students are done. And then if you need more time, I don't mind, because it's only 50 multiple choice questions. Students finish the lecture exam faster. And then we do a lab after the lecture exam, because technically it's a lab day. We have a lab that day, right? And then whatever we don't finish, we continue the following week. Okay, so yeah, let me see next week. Let me see whenever we do the exams, like when everyone finishes, and then if it makes sense, we can get started on the muscles, because the next thing is the muscles. The sooner we get started, the more time we have until lab exam 2. Okay, and muscles also have an extra credit opportunity, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay, everyone, we have more extra credits like towards the start, because it starts getting easier at the end. Okay, don't wait till it's the end of the semester, or you feel like, oh, your grade is struggling, and then now you have to do extra credit. Okay, because the opportunities are now. Whether you think you need it or not, just do it. You are gonna need it. Just turn in everything. Just do it. Okay, everything is worth points. Don't just rely on the exams, because you never know what might happen during exams. Okay, like I would just like whatever's guarantee, whatever's points, just to get it. And yeah, all right. Any other questions? Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so everyone, today we're gonna start lab 3 tissues and integumentary system. Before we get started, if you look at your lab 3 handout, if you turn the not the first page, like the first couple of pages, if you turn those, there's a one page where before the tables, there's a page where there's a bullet point. Yeah, it's just a bullet point of the tissues. I think it's like the 5th page or the 6th page. It's right before you hit the tables, right after the questions. Do you see that? Right before the table, yeah. Fourth page, yes, thank you. The 4th page, do you see there's a list there? Okay. By the way, everything that's on that list, all of you have learned this in Bio 5, okay? But today I'm gonna assume that you don't know it, and then we're gonna study everything here in class. And then a lot of times in Bio 5, we study the tissues, but I think we just memorize it just so that we know it, right? Today, I want us to because we repeat it many times, you'll end up memorizing it, but also understand it so that you don't forget it, okay? That's how we're gonna approach it. Because the names are probably super familiar to you. You've seen them in Bio 5, but I wanna make sure that you learn them today and then you understand them, okay? So everyone, if you look at that bullet points, those are all the tissues that we're supposed to know. And then I'm gonna break it down for you so that I'm gonna tell you like the easy part, the hard part, and then we're gonna get together through the hard part, and it's all gonna be okay. All right, so do you see it's divided into A, B, C, and D, right? So we have 4 types of tissues, right? What is the first type? A is epithelial tissue, B is connective tissue, C, muscle tissue, and then D is nervous tissue, right? And then, so we're gonna learn these 4 types, okay? And then to like eliminate the easy ones, which we're gonna do it again, if we're gonna review everything again. If you look at C and D, the muscle tissue, right? What are the 3 types of muscles? Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, right? So you think the muscle tissues are easy? Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, okay? What about the nervous tissue? What does it say? Nervous tissue, right? And then we know what a nerve cell looks like, right? A nervous tissue. So I would say C and D are easy, right? And then if you look at A and B, epithelial and connective tissue, those look like they have a list going on there, right? But the A, epithelial tissue, yes, it looks like there's a list, but it's very easy, I promise you. Epithelial tissues are the easiest one because we look at 2 things when we're labeling them. One, we look if it's 1 layer or 2 or more layers, and then we say simple or stratified. And then we look at the shape, if it's flat, cube, or column shape. And then we say squamous, cuboidal, or columnar, okay? We just need these 2 words, simple or stratified, or we just need the shape squamous, cuboidal, or columnar, and then we'll be able to identify all the epithelial tissues, okay? And then we're gonna go over this, and then it's very easy. I think the hard part is maybe the connective tissues, right? Do you see where we have loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue, and then is it cartilaginous? The cartilage, third one. And then after that, we have the cartilaginous. After that, what are the last 2? Bones. And then what is the one after that? Fluid, right? What are the bones?
Spongy bone.
Spongy and compact bone, right? And then what is the fluid? The blood, okay? So are those 2 easy? Right? So I think for the connective tissue, we just have to focus on the loose, dense, and then the cartilaginous connective tissues, okay? So is it easy? We got this, right? All right. So let's go ahead and get started here. Just because of time, we're not going to do this, but usually I ask students to get into groups, and then this one, you can look it up like over the internet or textbook or anything, and I ask you to just choose any random organ of the body, okay? Let's say the heart, okay? And then I ask you, which body system does that organ belongs to? The heart belongs to the cardiovascular system, right? And then this is something that each group does and shares it out, but we're just doing one example together. What is the function of that organ? What's the function of the heart? What does the heart do? Pumps blood, right, to all parts of the body. What type of tissue is that organ made up of? How do you say heart in anatomy? Cardiac, right? Which one was a cardiac one? Cardiac muscle tissue, right? Good job, everyone. And then how does the structure define the function of that organ? So how does the function of the heart, how does the structure define the function? Remember, I keep saying structure, it's made up of that way because of the function that it serves, right? The heart is very important and it has to be very strong. And then it's good that it's made up of muscles because it has to contract and relax every time it's pumping. Especially, I mean, all chambers are important, especially the left ventricle when it pumps the oxygenated blood, and then it has to do it in such strength where it has to travel outside of the heart through the aorta and from the aorta to all parts of the body from head to toe, right? So it needs to be able to handle a lot of pressure and then do that contraction and relaxation, right? So we would expect to see striations and intercalated discs on the cardiac muscle tissue. We're gonna get there. I'm just throwing information out there so that you'll hear it the second time, you'll understand it better, so that it can do the function, okay? So this activity would have been good if I didn't speak for like introductory material the first couple of minutes of class, but yeah, I would have asked each group to do different organs and tell us, you know, and try to answer to these questions, okay? But we did the heart all together, okay? The next slide here, everyone. This one, I don't ask you about this in lab, okay? But I do cover this in lecture, and I do want to take opportunity of this time to cover this slide with you because we're studying the tissues, and then we said that group of cells make a tissue, right? And then here in this slide, it talks about cell junctions, how cells come together, how do cells hold hands, how they're, you know, how like group of cells come together so that they can make a tissue, how do those cells communicate with one another, right? And all of that. So everyone, if you look at this slide, we have three types of cell junctions. Okay, cell junction is how like cells, they come together and they join together. Okay, the first one, and by the way, each one I resemble it to something, okay? For example, the first one, the tight junction, for me, it resembles a zip tie. You know how like we use a zip tie to connect two things together, right? So the tight junction is the zip tie one, all right? It's made up of junctional locking proteins. It helps to make the spaces between the cells impermeable, right? Just think of it as a zip tie. The second one, desmosomes, all right? For me, I think desmosomes, they resemble buttons, okay? You know, because like we use buttons so that we can like bring two pieces of clothing or like two sides together and button it up, right? And then, okay, this is gonna sound funny, but you know, anything to help us study or learn. But with buttons, have you noticed like, let's say, if we're trying to wear a jeans, but it's like we have to like struggle a little bit, but if we try hard, we can button it up, you know? So desmosomes remind me of buttons because with desmosomes, it increases the resistance of the tissue to mechanical stress. So even if it's like it encounters stress or anything, it can still hold the two cells together. Okay, and then that's what I meant. Like sometimes let's say we're trying to fit in the jeans, but we're not fitting, but we can like one way or another we can try to button it up, right? And then the last one, everyone, gap junction. Gap junction is just this opening where two cells can communicate or transport things from one cell to another, which is, these junctions allow small substances to move from one cell to another. Basically, here we're talking about different types of protein channels or transport proteins, right? How things, they can't just enter one cell and leave the other cell, right? There are these gap junctions that cells can communicate with one another by transporting molecules and stuff, okay? The reason why I covered this in lab, it's helpful for lecture. I won't ask you for these three junctions for lab, but I'm just trying to make a point on how cells come together and hold each other together so that, you know, we make a tissue, okay? So here in this slide, this is the structure of epithelial tissue. By the way, whenever I get the chance, because we're covering integumentary system in the second half of the class, I'm going to take the opportunity to link it to the integumentary system, which is the skin, right? Anatomy of the skin and the layers. I'm gonna try to relate it to that just because, just so that you have a lot of information about it, because we're gonna cover that today in the second portion, okay? So it doesn't hurt to know about it and relate to it once we do the integumentary system. Here, the image that we're seeing in this slide, everyone, it's kind of showing us the first two layers of the skin. I don't know if you remember from Bio 5, we have the epidermis and the dermis, right? The two layers of the skin. everyone, the top layer, the epidermis, is made up of epithelial tissues, all right? And then the bottom layer is made up of connective tissue, which is the dermis. And then we're gonna hear this a lot today, okay? But here, forget it's a skin because it's not specifying what it is. I want you to see the cells here. Do you see we have 1 cell, 2 cell, 3 cells? And then how can I tell each one is a cell? Because it's a box and then there's a nucleus inside of it in purple. Do we all see that? By the way, the pictures look good today. I just noticed. It's the right colors. Okay, so 1 cell, 2 cells, 3 cells, right? And then these look like epithelial cells to me because epithelial cells are literally the only cells that are like lined up next to each other. They're organized, right? Because connective tissues are gonna be just like space with fibers in it. Like it won't look like these cells. And then the muscle ones, they are just striations, right? We've seen the muscle. And then the nervous tissue is, we've seen the nerve cells, right? With the dendrites and the axons, okay? So we can tell this is an epithelial tissue because they're lining up next to each other. And then it's, in this case, it's 1 layer. It's simple and a columnar shape, okay? And then do you see how these cells, they're holding on together? Like, do you see some places with tight junctions and desmosomes, right? So yeah, and then everyone almost always, all the time, right underneath the epithelial tissue, you'll see there's a basement membrane. Do you all see the basement membrane? Okay, so once we go over all the epithelial tissues on our list, okay, you're gonna see every single one has a basement membrane underneath it, which is part of the epithelial tissue. Okay, that's when the tissue ends. Okay, and another interesting thing, we're gonna see that we're not gonna focus on this, but if you pay attention, you're gonna see that almost always underneath the epithelial tissue, there's a connective tissue. Do you know why? Because the epithelial tissue is just a cell. It's literally just a cell. Connective tissue, for example, here, you know how we have the epidermis and the dermis, the second layer of the skin? Everyone, you can all see the superficial layer of your skin. It's just skin, right? But if you look deeper into your skin, do you see you have blood vessels, right? Or do you see, like the hair that we have on our skin, right? Where's the root of that hair? It's not on the superficial layer, right? It's in the second layer. The root starts in the dermis, and then it pops out on the top layer, right? Also, we have our blood vessels, right? We have sensory receptors. That's how we feel pain, right? We have something called lamellated corpuscle, which we're not there yet. It helps us sense sense of touch, sense of vibration. Like when we start seeing, for example, here in front of you, I do have the model of the skin. Really, the top layer is the epidermis. It's made up of epithelial tissue, and then the middle layer, which is the larger layer, it's made up of dermis. And then do you see everything that's going on there, right? Because there's blood vessels and nerves and all those things, right? Almost always right underneath the epithelial tissue, we see connective tissue. Okay, and then in the connective tissue, we see blood vessels and all of those, because all cells, they need nutrients, they need oxygen, and then who delivers those? The blood vessels, right? Yeah, and then I don't want to focus too much on the dermis, or I don't want to focus too much on the connective tissues, because first we're going to start talking about the epithelial tissue first, okay? But before we jump on that, if you look at the basement membrane, it's made up of basal lamina and reticular lamina, and then we'll revisit those again. The basal lamina, part of the basement membrane, it's part of the epithelial tissue. And then the reticular is part of the connective tissue, which is part of the dermis. Okay, and then when we'll get there, we'll talk about it. All right, let's start studying the different types of tissues. So everyone, here we have the classification of epithelial cells. Okay, our epithelial cells, really, it's not hard to identify the structure. So like if I give you a picture and tell you which tissue is this, it's really not hard to be able to tell, because it's literally based on two things. One is the number of layers, and then two is the shape, okay? So first we look at it, that's how the name is made up of. It's made up of number of layers, and then it's made up of the shape, okay? So we look at the number of layers. If it's one layer, what is it called? Simple. If it's multiple layer, what is it called? Stratified, okay? So literally, if it looks like the first one layer, it's simple, a shape, epithelium. If it's multiple layers, two or more, stratified, the shape, epithelial tissue, okay? And then what are the shapes, everyone? We have flat, cubes, and columns. The cube looks like a square, the column looks like a cylindrical, rectangular shape, right? So what do we call the flat cells, the flat shaped cells? Squamous. What do we call the one that looks like cubes? And then the columns, columnar, okay? So it's gonna be one of these combinations. Simple, if it's simple flat, what is it? Simple squamous epithelial tissue. If it's simple and cube shape, simple cuboidal epithelial tissue. If it's one layer and column shape, simple columnar epithelium, right? And then the same for multiple layers. So what do we call if it's multiple layers and it has a flat shape? Stratified squamous epithelial tissue, right? Is everyone following? And then if it's multiple layers but cube shape, stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue. If it's multiple layer and column shape, stratified columnar epithelial tissue. Okay, good. We're gonna do each of those one by one, okay? But everyone, if you turn your pages to the next page after the bullet points, here you can see the table that you see on your page. It's the table that I am showing on my slide, okay? This is the table. I put this table in your study guide because it has a table of all the epithelial tissues with the pictures, okay? The first page was just a list, was just the bullet points, like these are the tissues we have to know. This one, it's a little bit with more details. It's this table here, okay? We're gonna review what's in this table. Everyone, the top table is the simple ones, the simple epithelial tissues, the ones with one layer. And then the second table is the tissues with multiple layer. Okay, it's the stratified epithelial tissue. Okay, and then it's the ones that we reviewed. I think there's like one or two that I'm gonna have to explain that we didn't go over it yet, but it's gonna be very easy. Okay, so let's go over the table first. Everyone, let's look at the simple epithelial tissues, and then I have the table here as well. If you look at the picture for the first one, what is that? One layer, right? And then what is the shape of the cell? Flat. So what's the name? Simple squamous epithelium, right? Good. And then the second one, look at the picture. How many layers is that? One layer, the shape, cubes. So it's simple cuboidal epithelium, right? The third one, how many layers? One. What's the shape? Column. So it's simple columnar epithelium. The last one, we didn't cover this last one, but we're gonna see it. And then here, the picture is not big enough, but by the way, we're gonna go over each and every one of those one by one, magnified, each one slide, and then you're gonna see these cells better, okay? But the last one, I don't know if you can see it clearly, okay? The last one, it looks like it's one layer. I mean, it looks like it's multiple layer, but it's technically one layer. If you look at it very closely, it's columnar. It has the column shape, but all of them are starting from that one layer. Okay, it's not a second layer and a third layer and a fourth layer. Okay, but because it looks like it's stratified but it's not really stratified. Okay, we give it the name pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. What does the term pseudo means? Pseudo means fake, false, right? You know how sometimes people use pseudonames, like fake false names, right? So the term is pseudo-stratified. Stratified means many layers, right? And then pseudo means false. So it looks like it's fake layers, right? But it's only one layer. But because it looks like that, we say pseudo stratified. And then if you look at it closely, these are columnar, okay? Column shape. So columnar epithelial tissue. Okay? All right. And then if we look at the bottom table, and then this is the magnified version, hopefully you can see the colors and everything good on the slide. So what do we see in the picture? One layer or multiple layer? Multiple layer. And then is it flat, cube, or column? The first one? Flat. You're supposed to say flat. It's flat. Okay, the first one is flat, okay? And everyone, the stratified squamous epithelium, here it's showing us that there's two types. Do you see the first two pictures? Okay, the difference between the two is, okay, it's correct, they are both stratified, it means multiple layer. Squamous, it means flat epithelial tissue, that's correct. But we have two types, and then it depends on which part of the body we're talking about, okay? We have keratinized and non-keratinized, which we're going to review the two. But just very briefly, what is keratinized and non-keratinized? So basically, we have parts of our body where the epithelial tissue or the skin is hardened, you know, or like you see more dead cells there, you know, like for example, under our heels, you know, like when you get pedicures, they try to like remove those dead skin, right? Probably some men don't know what I'm talking about, right? Like it's the places where you have like a harder skin where, you know, it dies off faster. But the reason why it's like that is because we use it more, we step on it more, you know, and then we have other parts of the body that layer, that skin is super soft, super fresh, it's not hard at all, right? And then those are called non-keratinized. Keratinized means like once it's keratinized, it means it's super hard, and then eventually it's just gonna like come off, right? And then new skin, it's gonna come instead. Okay, but non-keratinized means it's very soft, fresh, new cells. It's not like keratinized. Okay, and then we're gonna see an example soon. Or here it's showing us, for example, epidermis, the top layer of the skin. This is keratinized, okay? It's the top layer is dead cells. It always comes off, and then there's new cells building up. For example, non-keratinized mouth, inside our mouth, right? Like with your tongue, if you touch inside your mouth, is that soft versus your hands, right? It's a fresh skin. Pharynx, right? Larynx, esophagus, and other places. And then let's look at the third picture. What is the shape? Cuboidal. How many layers? 2 layers. So what do we call 2 layers? Stratified. So we have stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue. And then the one underneath that, what is the shape? Columns. And then how many layers? 2. So it's stratified columnar epithelial tissue. And then the last one, we didn't cover the last one, but it's very easy. The last one, everyone, if you look at it closely, and then we'll see a magnified image of the last one. You probably can't see it clearly. If you look at it closely, you can find flat cells, you can find cuboidal cells, and you can find columnar cells. Okay, you can find all these different types of cells. And that's why this one is called transitional. Transitional means changing, right? It's not one, it's like multiple, right? So it's called transitional epithelium. All right, everyone, if you look at this table and this table, or just this table has everything together, how do we feel about the epithelial tissues? And then after this, we're gonna review each picture one by one. What's the first one called? Simple squamous epithelium. Then we have simple cuboidal epithelium. Can I ask everyone to participate so we can learn? And then the third one, columnar epithelium, and try to say it by looking at the picture, not the name. And then if you don't know the name, then look at the name, okay? The last one is that fake column one. So what do we call it? Pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue. And then let's look at the stratified ones. Okay, the first one is stratified squamous epithelial tissue. And then this one, we have what? Keratinized and non-keratinized, right? Which one was the soft and which one was the hard? Keratinized is the hard, non-keratinized is the soft, good. And then the third picture is showing us stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue. And then the next one is stratified columnar epithelial tissue. And then the last one is the one that has all the shapes and its multiple layers. It's called transitional epithelium, okay? So let's review those. And then, so you're gonna be super familiar with those because we already studied the table, right? Do you all feel good about the epithelial tissues, right? And they're very easy, and you can definitely you should be able to identify it because it doesn't look like any other tissues, okay? Like connective tissue looks different, muscle tissues look different, and we already know the nervous tissue does not look like anything else, right? With the axons and the dendrites. Now let's look at each picture, everyone. This one is a cartoon diagram. The one next to it where it says light microscope 530 times magnified is actually what we see if we look at it under the microscope, which is very close to the cartoon diagram, okay? And one thing I want you to pay attention to, for example, this one is which one? What's the name of this tissue? Simple squamous epithelium, and the picture makes sense, right? It's one layer, flat cells next to each other. Do you see there's a basement membrane right underneath it, right? And then what's the tissue underneath the epithelial tissue? It's a connective tissue, okay? Look how connective tissue looks nothing like the epithelial tissue, okay? We should be able to identify it. Connective tissue has this, has like fibers or has collagen bundles, you know? It does not look like it's not like bunch of cells stacked up over each other or next to each other. It's not like that, okay? And then almost always underneath the epithelial tissue, we're gonna find connective tissue, okay? And then as we go through, like right now, we're just learning the epithelial tissues. And as I go over the slides, I want you to pay attention that we're going to see different types of connective tissues depending on whatever the epithelial tissue is. But I don't want to focus on it because that's not important. But if you notice it, I just want to bring it to your attention. Okay? So where do we find simple squamous epithelial tissue? Which organ is made up of this type of tissue because of its function? The lungs, right? Pleura is the lungs, right? Does it make sense? And then we've talked about this before. The lungs were the diagram example for the slide where we were learning structure defines the function. Do you all remember that? Because if the lung is made up of this one layer, flat, simple, squamous epithelial tissue, then it's a very thin, right? Thin layer for gas exchange to happen when the blood vessels from the heart come to the lungs so that they can get oxygen in the blood and then dump the carbon dioxide, right? For that gas exchange to happen, you need that layer to be very thin. Otherwise, if it's thick, it cannot serve its purpose, okay? Structure defines the function. All right, are we okay with this first one? 100%? Okay. Next, what is this one? It's one layer, and what is the shape? Cube, right? So what is the name? Simple cuboidal epithelium. And then it's one layer, it's cube. Everyone, I know it looks a little bit different, but do you all still see the basement membrane? Yes, and then it is also surrounded by connective tissues, okay? Because we need blood vessels and everything that's found in the connective tissue so that we get like nutrients and oxygen, all of that to the cells, okay? And which organ is made up of simple cuboidal epithelium? The kidney. Um, so everyone, the job of the kidney, and then this is just general information. I'm not gonna ask you this, right? But what does the kidney do? The kidney's job is basically it takes the fluid, right, the blood, it enters the kidney, and then in the kidney filtration happens, right? And then sometimes absorption happens and secretion happens. Basically, what the kidney does is it tries to filter out the blood, and then it takes out the good nutrients and the liquid that we need, right? And then it retains it, and then so that the body can use it. And the stuff that we don't need, right? And then I'm talking about liquid waste, okay? It turns it into urine, and then we urinate and let it out, right? And then, yeah, so it does a lot of secretion, and sometimes it does absorption. For example, if we have excess liquid in the body, like we're super hydrated, we have excess liquid, then it gets rid of it in the form of urine. But if we're dehydrated, is it gonna waste it in the form of urine, or it's going to try to retain it as much as possible? It's gonna retain it, right? And then we'll talk about the kidneys, but I just wanted to like give some information that some organs that play the role of secretion, they are made up of cuboidal epithelium. What is this one here? Simple columnar epithelium. You see the columns, one layer, right? And then, by the way, what are these dark spots, dark dots in the middle of the cells? Those are the nucleus. Okay, good, good, good. And then do we all see the basement membrane? Yes. Do we see the underlying connective tissue? Right? And then, by the way, this connective tissue is different than this connective tissue. It's different than this connective tissue because we have different types of connective tissues, which we're gonna learn when we get there, okay? Which organ or gland in the body is made up of, or what part of that organ is made up of simple columnar epithelial tissue? Pancreatic duct. Okay, a little bit about the pancreas. Last week in the digestive system, we talked about the pancreas, right? Because pancreas has these pancreatic juices that it releases it, and then it merges with the liver juices, right, to the common bile duct, like from the bile from the gallbladder and the hepatic juices from the liver, and then the pancreatic juices from the pancreas, they merge together, and then they get dumped in the duodenum of the small intestine to help with digestion, right? We also see pancreas in the endocrine system once we get there, right? Because it also produces insulin and all that stuff. So pancreas is an organ where we see in more than one body systems, okay? And then I think at some point I ask you that, so just remember it. So the pancreatic duct is the duct where the pancreatic juices are flowing out of the digestive juices are flowing out of the pancreas, and it's made up of simple columnar epithelium. Yes, and then we're gonna see, these are, I'll just answer real quick, but we're gonna see this again. The connective tissues, you're gonna see they're made up of fibers, like these strands, and then we have fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are cells. Blast means they make more cells. So if I say fibroblast, it means that cells that make fibers, right? Or for example, osteoblast means cells that make, what's an osteon? Bone cells, right? Osteoblast. So that's what blast means. So the cells with the nucleus are the fibroblasts, because these are cells with a nucleus that make the fibers. And then we're gonna see it. Okay. Yep. Good question. So yeah, the basement membrane, and then we have an underlying connective tissue. At any point, whenever you see an image under the microscope of a cell, always the dark spot is gonna be the nucleus. Always, always, always. All right, and then this is the false one, the fake one, right? What do we see here? Pseudo stratified columnar epithelium, good. And then I think we see it more clearly here. Do you see? And then it is kind of hard to see, but they are all coming from one layer. Okay, it's not multiple layers. And this cell is a special cell because what does it have? Remember we talked about, yes, remember we talked about some cells are special cells, like they have microvilli for absorption, they have cilia where they do this sweep-like motion, right? Some have flagella, right? Depending on what the cell is, what's the function is, right? Based on that, the structure is that. So everyone, speaking of function, structure defining the function, where do we find pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue? The trachea, okay? Inside the trachea. And then remember the first time I was explaining what is cilia? It's like this hair-like structure, right? And then it moves in this sweep-like motion to move particles, right? Basically, it makes sense that our trachea is made up of pseudostratified columnar epithelium because what do we do when we have something stuck in our throat? We start coughing, and then the harder we cough, and then obviously there is something in there that's like pushing it out, whatever that's stuck, right? A mucus or whatever it is, right? That's the job of the cilia with that hair-like structure, and then it moves it up, okay? And then this is an example of pseudostratified columnar epithelium made in the trachea, okay? That makes the trachea. Next, so remember we talked about stratified. So now we're gonna do the stratified ones, okay? And then we have stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, stratified columnar. But for the stratified squamous, we said we have keratinized and non-keratinized, right? So here, this example here, it's the non-keratinized one. It's the one that is soft, not hardened or dead cells. And basically, what is keratin, everyone? Keratin is a protein that helps like form our hair, nails, and then our outer layer of our skin, right, which is the epidermis, right? Basically, it helps support our skin, heal the wounds, and keep our nails and hair healthy. And but it's also going to be the hardened part, right? Non-keratinized is basically soft, fresh. And then we talked about some of the organs where we have it. Here in this example, first let's look at the image. We have stratified multiple layers, flat squamous epithelial tissues. And then do we all see the basement membrane? And then do you see the underlying connective tissue? And then this is a different connective tissue that we haven't seen yet. Do you see like it has things on it that looks like eyes, right? We'll get there when we get there, okay? That's a different type of connective tissue. So here in this picture, we can see that we see a non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelial tissue from the vagina. And then, like I said, structure defines the function and where it's located in the body. All right, the next one, how many layers is this? Multiple layers. What's the shape? Cube, right? So do we all see stratified cuboidal epithelium? Do you see the basement membrane around it? Like the end of the cell, okay? The last layer. And then do you see the surrounding connective tissue, right? These look like collagen fibers, which we'll learn when we do the connective tissue. And then which gland is made up of stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue? Sweat glands, okay? Everyone, if you can see this model of the skin, do you see the sweat gland in the model? Well, not here, yeah, but anyways, there's a sweat gland there, right? And then the sweat glands, everyone, it's not on the top layer of our skin, not on the epidermis, it's in the dermis, the second layer. And then it makes sense, right? Because I mean, the pores are outside, but the gland is underneath. And then sweat glands, they secrete sweat, right? And then we sweat it out outside of our pores of our epidermis, the top layer, right? So the sweat gland is made up of stratified cuboidal epithelium. And then this is where I'm putting the two together. Like, you know how I said the kidney does secretion, right? It's made up of simple cuboidal epithelium. The sweat gland secretes sweat, and it's also made up of stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue. So I'm just thinking that the cuboidal shape helps with secretion, okay? All right, the next one is multiple layers. The shape is column. So stratified columnar epithelium. And where do we find this? In which glands? Salivary glands. Do you remember the 3 salivary glands from last week when we did the digestive system? Who can name the 3 glands? Or just like each person can say one? Sublingual gland. That one is the easy one, because remember I said language, it's language tongue, it's found underneath our tongue, so that's the sublingual gland. Good. We have 2 more. One had to do with the bone that's found here. Submandibular. Good, good. Submandibular gland. And then this one has nothing to do with anything. It's just the name we need to know. It's underneath the cheeks. No, it has nothing to do with the name. Yeah, but it's underneath the cheek, and then there's no hints or anything for it. We just have to memorize the name. It's the parotid gland, okay? Parotid, okay? It's like there's no way to remember it, but sublingual, submandibular, and then parotid gland, okay? These are the 3 salivary glands, and then they're made up of stratified columnar epithelium. And then the last one is the one that changes shapes, like it has not changes shapes, it has different shapes, right? Squamous cuboidal columnar. It's gonna be the transitional epithelial, stratified transitional epithelial tissue, and then we can see it in which organ? Urinary bladder. Urinary bladder is where our urine gets collected. You know, the kidney sends it out of the kidney from the urethra to the urinary bladder, and then that's where we collect it. And then whenever it's full, you urinate. Or it's not full, but a baby is sitting on it and you have to urinate. All right, everyone, just look at this table like 5 seconds, like take a memory picture or like just look at the images and then the names. And are we good with the epithelial tissues? Yes? Yes? Okay, good. All right. This is just an image of an unicellular exocrine gland. It's made up of epithelial tissue, but don't worry about it, okay? Next, we're gonna talk about the connective tissues, okay? Remember, for the connective tissues, if we go back to the page with the bullet points, we had loose, we had dense, and then we had cartilaginous, and then we had the bone and the blood, right? The bone and the blood are easy. And then the loose and dense are also not going to be too bad, okay? And then we have some cartilaginous, which is also not going to be too bad. But this is like the hardest part of today, okay? We just have to get through this. But before we start the list of the tissues, I just want to tell you what to expect with the connective tissue. How do you know that it's a connective tissue? It's not epithelial, muscle, or nervous. The connective tissue is gonna look different. Connective tissue is not bunch of cells lining up next to each other or on top of each other. It's not like that. It's literally just take it as a canvas, like a background, and then it has just strands, like cables, like strands, and then these are called the fibers, okay, which you can see here. And then some places you're going to see fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are, do you see the fibroblasts in this picture, right? Fibroblasts are the cells, and then they have a nucleus in the middle, right? And then and then their job is to make more fibers, okay? Fibroblasts, they make more fibers. And and then yeah, so like these are like the main things that we see. Sometimes it gets so dense, which brings us to the dense connective tissues, like because it's packed with fibers. Like it's so packed with fibers that you don't see the background because it's so packed with fibers. Okay? So this picture that we're seeing, it's a loose one because you have like only a couple of fibers, strands, right? And then we can obviously see the background here. Okay? So this is what we're gonna expect when we look at connective tissues, okay? And then the other types of connective tissues, like one of it's the bones, but the bones, if you see it, you know it's a bone, right? It looks like, I don't know, it looks like if you cut off the log, like from the tree, and then you have these lines, right? That's how I imagine it, but we'll see the picture. And then the blood, we know what a blood looks like, right, when we see it. Another type of connective tissue that looks nothing like any of the other tissue is the adipose tissue, which we're gonna learn about it too. Everyone, adipose tissue, it looks like these bubbles, right? And then we do have like cells with nucleus. Do you see that? Some places. Adipose tissues are fat cells, okay? They're the only ones that look like this. It's the adipose tissues. And then if you see like a picture like this with bubbles, they're the fat cells, they're the adipose tissues, okay? And then you know how we said the epidermis is made up of epithelial tissue of the first layer of the skin. The second layer, the dermis, is made up of what? Connective tissue, right? And then we have the epidermis, dermis, and then do you know what's underneath that? We call it hypodermis, right? But it's not part of the layers of the skin. That hypodermis, it's made up of adipose tissue. So we have everyone, we have the first layer and the second layer, and then underneath it, it's all fat cells, fat tissues. And then it's good because their job is to provide heat, insulation, and protect our organs. Like we want our organs to be protected with some fat cells so that they are protected. Okay? So these slides are just like, it's an introduction of what to expect with the connective tissues, okay? So before we go over each type of connective tissue one by one, all right, first let's go to the summary table. Like let's get introduced, let's see the list, and then we'll come back and review each one by one, okay? So everyone, the first, if you go to the table for your connective tissue, remember we said we have loose and dense, right? So for the loose, right? And then the first picture is very similar to the picture we saw when I was introducing connective tissues. It's loose because we see the fibers, right? The background that I kept saying background, it's called the ground substance. What is it called? Ground substance, okay? So we're gonna see ground substance, and then we're gonna see the ones that are cells with nucleus inside. Those are gonna be the fibroblasts, right? Because they're cells that make more fiber cells. All right, and then that's for the loose connective tissue. But here it doesn't have the full term. If you want, write it in your tables. It's called loose areolar, A-R-E-O-L-A-R, areolar connective tissue, okay? The loose areolar connective tissue, it's easy to identify it because you can see the ground substance. It's not super packed with fibers, okay? Everyone, next, I'm gonna cover the dense connective tissues, okay? And if you look at the dense, everyone, and look at the first two of the dense, what is the first one called? Irregular. What is the second one called? Regular, okay? If you look at the shape, remember I said that the loose is gonna have fibers, but it's not gonna be packed. The dense is going to be dense because it's super packed with fibers, correct? And then if you look at the first two, the irregular and the regular, these are super packed with fibers that we have collagen bundles now, okay? It's like super packed. And how can we tell if it's dense irregular connective tissue or dense regular connective tissue. If you look at the fibers, right, the irregular one versus regular one, right, which one is more organized? The strands go more parallel. The regular one, right? Doesn't the irregular one looks irregular, right? So we just have to look at, so we already know that connective tissues have fibers, right? And then because this is packed with fibers, like we see these two images, we still see the ground substance, yes, but is it a lot? No, because it's so packed with fibers, right? So the fibers are there and it's packed and we only see a little bit of the ground substance. So we just look at the strands, and then if we see that it's parallel, it's nice, organized, then it's a regular dense connective tissue. If it's like not organized, irregular, then it's going to be the dense irregular connective tissue, okay? Well, the connective tissues are not so bad after all, right? We got this. The third one from the dense, everyone, do you see it's regular because do you see like it's parallel? It's not irregular. And then also, do you see how it looks like, I don't know, like a rubber band? It looks like it's elastic, right? So it's called dense regular elastic connective tissue. Okay, so that one, again, these are made up of fibers, but the type of fiber is elastic fibers, okay? And then shortly, whenever I magnify each image one by one, we're gonna learn where we can find like which organ or which part of the body is made up of elastic uh, dense connective tissue. It's going to be because of the function. We need something that it's going to be something that it encounters to a lot of pressure, a lot of high volume, where it doesn't rupture because it's elastic. It can take the responsibility to hold it. Okay, so that's why it's elastic, and then it's regular because it's organized, right? Okay, so far we did 4 connective tissues. The first one was the loose areolar connective tissue. And then for the dense, the first one was dense regular connective tissue. The second one was dense regular connective tissue. The third one was dense regular elastic, okay? And then all of these 4, if you look at the image, you can come up with the name, correct? Okay. Then everyone, we have the reticular connective tissue. And then the last one is the one with the bubbles. We already saw that. What is the last one? Adipose connective tissue, which is our fat cells, okay? So now let's look at the reticular connective tissue. Reticular connective tissue, everyone, it's made up of fibers, but reticular fibers. And then if you look at it, it looks different than other fibers. And reticular connective tissue, they're gonna have leukocytes. What are leukocytes? White blood cells, right? What do white blood cells do? It's part of our immune system. They are, I call them the white soldiers because they're protecting us, right? Part of our immune system. Reticular connective tissue. And then it's too soon to talk about this because we don't do lymphatic system till like April or May, like towards the end. It's part of we see reticular connective tissue in our lymph nodes. So, in like very briefly, everyone, the lymphatic system is our drainage system, okay? You know how like when you have like liquid accumulated in a certain area of the body, what does it get? It gets swollen, right? It shouldn't be like that. Like you shouldn't have liquid accumulated in one place, a certain spot of the body, because it gets swollen. Also, whenever you have liquid accumulated in some place, it's more prone to infections and bacteria, right? And then it's not good. So throughout our body, okay, we have lymph nodes everywhere. And then where it's rich with our immune system, right? Where it fights off any infections and then it clears the liquid where we have liquid accumulated, okay? That's why we call it the drainage system, okay? So anyways, I'm not like, don't worry about this. I'm just giving examples so that we can relate it to something and be able to study, okay, memorize it. So reticular connective tissue, we find it in lymph nodes, and it's made up of reticular fibers and has leukocytes, okay? And what was the last one? Adipose connective tissue. All right, so everyone, how do we feel so far? So the first one is loose areolar connective tissue. Then we have dense irregular connective tissue. Then we have dense. And then try to look at the picture and say it, okay? And then if you can't remember it, then read the words. Then we have dense, regular, elastic. And then what about our lymph nodes? They're made up of connective tissue. And then the last one is the adipose connective tissue, which is our fat cells, okay? And then we only have these ones left, and then we'll come back to that, okay? These are the cartilage ones, everyone. And then the first three are, you can tell that it's the cartilage ones because it's the one with the eyes and some fibers. We'll get back to that. But the last two are what? Bone and blood, okay? Like, and then those are easily identifiable, okay? But we'll come back to those. Let's do the loose and the dense ones. So everyone here, what is the first one here? Loose areolar connective tissue, right? And then were you able to tell it just by looking at the picture? Yes, right? It's loose. Can you see the ground substance? Do you see the fibroblasts? Right, so it has, and then it does have some, like, I see some elastic fibers here and there and collagen fibers here and there, but it's very loose, right? And then where do we find loose connective tissue? So all of us know that the top layer of the skin, the epidermis, it's made up of epithelial tissues, right? Underneath that, where we have the dermis, deeper layer of the skin, it's made up of loose connective tissue. And then it makes sense that it's made up of loose connective tissue because we won't have room for all these fibers if we're gonna put the sweat glands, the hair roots, the sensory receptors, the blood vessels, right? We do have fibers, but it's not as much, right? All right, are we good with this? And then for the dense, which one is this one? Regular or irregular? Irregular, okay? Because look at how the regular one looks, okay? This is the irregular one. Irregular, it says collagen fibers. So now it's dense. It means like it's accumulated, it's compact with fibers. So it makes a collagen bundle. Sorry. And then, so this is irregular collagen bundles because it's like, it's not regular shape. Do we all see the ground substance? Yes, but not as much because it's crowded with fibers. And then do you all still see fibroblasts here and there, the ones with the nucleus, the cells, right? Because it needs to be making more fibers and collagen bundles and all of that, okay? And then irregular connective tissue, we see it deeper, even deeper layer of the skin. It starts becoming dense irregular connective tissue. And then which one was this one? Dense, regular, collagenous connective tissue. Basically, again, we have our fibers, which make the collagen bundles. And then we all see the fibroblasts. And then we see the ground substance, but it's like barely, right? Because it's so compact with the fibers, okay? Where do we find dense, regular, collagenous connective tissue? We find it where we have the tendons between our bones, okay? All right, which one was this one? The elastic one, right? And then is it regular or irregular? Regular, elastic. Is it dense? It is dense, right? And then we see the ground substance, right? So do you know where we have elastic connective tissue? Aorta, okay? Everyone, do you know where the aorta is? We have the heart, right? And then right after the heart, our major, biggest artery, right, is the aorta. And aorta has a big responsibility because that when the left ventricle pumps that oxygenated blood and then that blood leaves the heart, it's gonna leave through the aorta, and then the aorta has to be able to handle all that pressure and volume of that blood flow that's coming, because all that blood has to serve all the superior and inferior cells of the body, like from the head all the way to the tip of the toe. Every single cell needs that oxygenated blood. Okay, so imagine the pressure, and then imagine if the aorta was not made up of elastic regular connective tissue, it would have ruptured, right? It would not have handled all that blood volume and all that responsibility, right? Structure defines the function. And then which one was the connective tissue that we see it in the lymph nodes? Reticular connective tissue. And then as you can see, it looks different than any other ones. And then what other cells does it have besides the reticular fibers? White blood cells, leukocytes, right? All right, correct. Good job, everyone. And then what was the last one? Adipose connective tissue. And then this one is the fat cells. And then remember I said we have the epidermis, dermis, and then hypodermis, which is not part of the skin, but it's the layer underneath the skin. It's the fat that protects all of our organs, okay? All right, so we did this one, this part. How do we feel about the connective tissues here? All right, so what were they? The loose one was the areolar connective tissue. Then we have dense irregular connective tissue. Then we have dense regular connective tissue. Then dense regular elastic. Then reticular connective tissue. And the last one is the adipose connective tissue, okay? Okay. How are we feeling about this? Good, good. Okay. Once we do this one as well, then everything else is easy, okay? I think this is the hard part of the tissues. By the way, do we all still remember the epithelial tissues? Simple, stratified, the shapes. Okay, good. All right. So now these are the specialized connective tissue. First, we're gonna cover the cartilage part. And then the last two, they're very easy. What is the last two? Bone and blood, okay? And then quickly, the bone, we have the compact bone and the spongy bone. And then the blood, we have the red blood cells, erythrocytes, white blood cells, platelets, right? That make the blood, the plasma. And then the difference between the white blood cells and the red blood cells is white blood cells have a nucleus. Do red blood cells have a nucleus? They don't have a nucleus, okay? All right, so we only have the first three left, the cartilaginous connective tissues, okay? And then everyone, you know how I said connective tissues have fibers, and then that's how we can tell that they are connective tissue. The first one, the one that is called hyaline connective tissue, it's the one that, and then I just remember like the hyaline is the one with eyes and only eyes. It doesn't have fibers in there, okay? So do you see, everyone, do you see the eyes in the hyaline cartilaginous connective tissue? These are called chondrocytes, okay? Again, they're similar to fibroblasts, but they're called chondrocytes, and then we'll talk more about it soon. And then, so I'm gonna call it eyes until we feel comfortable and just call them chondrocytes, okay? But you can see the three cartilaginous ones are have these eyes in there because these eyes are the cells that make the collagen, okay? Those are called chondrocytes, and then their job is to make these collagens, okay? So the hyaline, do you see any fibers in there? No, it's only the chondrocytes. And you know how for the other connective tissue, the background was called what? Ground substance. Here in this one, it's called ECM. ECM stands for extracellular matrix. So go ahead and if you're not familiar with it, go ahead and write it down because you'll see this a lot in biology textbooks. ECM, they write that instead of writing extracellular matrix. Okay, so hyaline is made up of the chondrocytes and the extracellular matrix, correct? Okay, and then, so are we good with the first one? Okay, what is the name of the second one? Fibrocartilage. So we still have the eyes, right? Because there are the chondrocytes that make these collagens, right? But it's called fibrocartilage. We also have what? Collagen fibers, okay? Do you see eyes and fibers, right? And the extracellular matrix, right? So this is called the fibrocartilage, right? So we have the eyes and the fibers. The third one, do we see the eyes, the chondrocytes? Okay. Also, if you look at like very closely, and then I know the picture is tiny, do you see elastic fibers? Right? These are elastic fibers. So it's called elastic cartilaginous connective tissue. Okay? So we have hyaline, we have fibrocartilage, and then we have elastic cartilage connective tissue. Okay? How do we feel about these three? Okay, so what is the first one called? Hyaline cartilage connective tissue. The second one, fibrocartilage connective tissue. The third one, elastic cartilage connective tissue. And then what are the last two here? Bone and blood. Okay, good. Do you still remember those? Okay, good. Okay, so let's review the couple that we just learned right now. So everyone, this is the, which one is this one? Hyaline, right? Because it has chondrocytes and it has the extracellular matrix. So basically, hey Carla, basically the chondrocytes are cells that which has secreted the matrix of the cartilage, and then it comes part of it and it becomes embedded in it. Okay, it secretes the matrix of the cartilage. So speaking of cartilage, where do we see hyaline cartilage in which organ? Trachea. Everyone, you've seen like the trachea is like these, it has these layers, right, in between, right? Those are the cartilages in between the trachea, and it's made up of hyaline cartilage, okay? What was the second one? Fibrocartilage. So we're gonna see chondrocytes and we're gonna see fibers, correct? So fibrocartilage, we see it in intervertebral discs. Where do we find the intervertebral discs?
In our spine.
Yeah, so whatever we have our vertebral column and then our vertebra, right, stacked on top of each other. In between each vertebra, we have this cushiony thing, which is made up of cartilage, right? And then it's found in between each vertebra. And if we still have our cartilages, then we're so blessed, because as we age, as we get older, or if something happens, these cartilages start fading away. And then there are people that they experience back pain, and then like with non-medical terms, they say, oh, I have a disc. What they mean is this cartilage is faded, and then now the bones of the vertebra are, instead of sitting it on that cushion in between the bones, right? Now they're touching each other and then causing pain, okay? And then now they have injections and other things to take care of it, but let's enjoy our fibrocartilages while we still have them, okay? It's very important and it's very painful when we don't have these tissues there, okay? It's part of our intervertebral discs, okay? It's part of our vertebral column. Okay, it got dark. So anyways, it has the eyes and it has the fibers, right? Let's go to the next one. This is fun. So which one is this one? Elastic cartilage, right? So this one, it has the eyes, the chondrocytes, and then do you see the elastic fibers, right? So this one, it has to be part of the body that plays the role of being flexible, being elastic, right? To be able to do that function, right? Because this is the structure. Do we all remember the epiglottis from last week? Right? Do you remember whenever we're eating, right? We have the opening of the esophagus open and the trachea is open. And then to be able to control the things going down the right pipe, right? We have to make sure that we have this epiglottis, which is this flap, right? And then if we're eating, it covers the trachea. And then if we're breathing, it covers the esophagus so that the wrong thing doesn't go down the wrong tube, right? So epiglottis, to be able to play this role, be flexible and be the flap that goes back and forth, right? It needs to be elastic, right? So what is it made up of? Elastic cartilage, okay? Or the epiglottis. And then what were the last two? This one was the bone, right? And then you can see the bone. Do you see how the bone has osteoblast, right? And then remember we said the blast is the cell that makes more of that cell. So osteoblast, they're responsible for formation of new bones, right? We have something called osteoclast higher than that. And those are responsible for reabsorption of the aged bones, right? Because cells die and then someone needs to clean it up and then make new cells, right? And then we have something called osteocytes. So these osteoblasts, they grow, and then become osteocytes, and then they travel down, and then just they become part of the bone matrix. Okay, that's how bones are made. And then what was the last one? Blood. It's made up of red blood cells, erythrocytes, leukocytes, white blood cells, platelets, and plasma. Okay? All right, everyone. Wow, we did it. We crossed the bridge. How do we feel about the second table of the connective tissues? Good, good, good. Okay. No, go ahead, of course. Uh, so you would say bone is, yeah, you can say spongy connective tissue or compact connective tissue. Yes. For blood, we would just say blood, and then blood is a connective tissue. Like we don't specify it. Yeah, we just say it's the blood is a type of a connective tissue. That's it. Like the blood is the connective tissue. It's the blood. Yeah, yeah. That's how we say it. Yes, yes. Any other questions? All right, everyone, do we feel good about loose, dense, and cartilaginous, and the bone and blood connective tissues? Yes? Okay, all right. So, do you think like you're understanding better now, right? Rather than just like memorizing and trying to guess the names? Okay, good. So what was, if we go back to our bullet points, what was C? What type of muscle tissues? What type of tissues? Muscle tissues, right? And then how many types of muscle tissues do we have? 3 types. What are they? And smooth, okay? Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. So everyone, let's start with the skeletal, and then we'll do the cardiac, and then we'll do the smooth after. So for the skeletal muscle tissue is made up of striations, and then it makes sense because skeletal muscle tissue is the one that when we want to do contraction, relaxation, right, of our biceps or any kind of movement that I want to do, right? That's how I control these muscles, right? So it's made up of skeletal muscle tissue. It has multiple nuclei, right, that make up the cell, and it's made up of striations, okay? And then another characteristic of the skeletal muscle tissue that the other muscle tissues don't have is the skeletal muscle tissue voluntary or involuntary? Voluntary, right? So like if I want to raise my hand, I give a command, and then my muscle tissues, they contract or relax, and then I'm able to do whatever I want to do. Or if I'm going to walk around, I can choose to do it, right? And so on. And then we have these striations because it has to do contraction and relaxation, okay? Skeletal muscle tissue and cardiac muscle tissue, which we're going to see on the next slide, they do have some similarities, but they have different characteristics. They're similar with the striations, okay? The cardiac muscle tissue also has striations because it needs to be able to contract and relax. And but it has the shape, it's more branched out. Do you see how it's branched? And it has intercalated discs. Do we see that? So that's the difference between skeletal muscle tissue and cardiac muscle tissue. It has these intercalated discs and it's more branched out. And you still see the nuclei, right, on the cells. Okay, good. Which organ in the body is made up of this muscle tissue? The heart, right? And then obviously because of this function, and then heart needs to pump, contract, relax. It has these striations, but addition to that, it has the intercalated discs and it's more branched out, okay? Is the cardiac muscle tissue voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary, right? Because are we just sitting here and telling our heart to pump, pump, pump again? And then if we forget, it stops pumping? No, right? It's involuntary. And then the last one is, what's the last one? Smooth muscle tissue. Smooth muscle tissue is, okay, this one is the confusing one, okay? Because if I didn't tell you this is a muscle tissue, what other tissue does it look like? Stratified what? Stratified squamous epithelial, right? Like, for example, if I get this picture and then I have to choose between smooth muscle tissue or stratified squamous epithelial, I would like, I don't know, because they look the same, right? So I'm just bringing it to your attention, and I won't ask like that and put both of them as a choice, okay? And if I have, please ask me during the exam, and I'll just give the answer for that question. Look at this one. Smooth muscle tissue looks nothing like the skeletal and the cardiac muscle tissue, right? It's just the cells, smooth muscle cells. They look very smooth. They have the nuclei. And then which organ is made up of smooth muscle tissue? Stomach. Is the smooth muscle tissue voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary, right? Because our stomach is made up of muscle, and then it helps with digestion. It does churning. It has all these acids, right? That helps with digestion. And then we're not sitting and giving commands to our stomach to do the digestion, right? And then another reason why the stomach is a muscle, I don't know if you've noticed, like the stomach, like depending on how much we're eating, you know, like some days we just like don't care and go all out, right? And then some days, like, let's say, I don't know, we're having a hard day and then we're not eating as much. The stomach is a muscle. It can expand and then it can get smaller, right? So it's made up of a muscle. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's made up of smooth muscle tissue. Okay, how do we feel about muscle tissues? Good. And then what's the last type of tissue? Nervous tissue, the nerves, right? Again, nothing looks like this one. It has the cell body, right? It has the nucleus inside the cell body. It has the dendrites. It has the tail, the axon, right? Outside, it has the extracellular matrix. And then the reason why the nervous tissue looks like this is because of the function it serves. It has to pass down the commands through action potential from the brain to, let's say, to the muscle or whatever organ that it's going to, okay? All right, how do we feel about all the tissues? So if we go back to that page with the bullet points, if you look at the list, you know, about 2 hours ago versus now, how are we feeling? Good. Did we learn everything in class? Okay, like, do you think you just need to review the tissues and then you can just start studying the bones? Okay, that's what I want you to do. All right, everyone, let's take a 5-minute break. It's like 6 minutes. It's 3:49. Let's come back at 3:55. I don't want to do it longer so that we're not like, you know, it's not 4:50 and then we're still trying to finish things. And then this would go faster. Yeah, let's do 5-6 minutes break and then we'll start the integumentary system, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. All right, everyone. Right now we're gonna start the integumentary system. We're done with discussing the parts of the body at a chemical level, cellular level, or even tissue level. Right now we know the basics, about the different types of cells, and then how groups of cells they make a tissue. And then all of us know the different types of tissues now, right? And then from now on, we're just gonna cover the different systems, okay? The first one that we're gonna cover today is gonna be the integumentary system. Even though we already started with the body systems last week, we did the digestive system, okay? And then from now on, we're just gonna cover different body system every week. We're gonna be focusing more on the structures and then organs that make this the body system that we're covering. Okay. Yeah. So next week we're gonna start the bones, lab 5, and then if we can get started on that, that would be great. Okay. So integumentary system. What's the major organ that is part of the integumentary system, which is the skin, right? It's the largest organ of the body. Basically, our whole body is covered with skin. So we're going to talk about the basic anatomy of the skin. And then just by looking at this, right, now that we know about the tissues, right, we know that the top layer of the skin is called what? Epidermis. Epidermis is made up of what type of tissue? You don't have to like go into details. Like, is it epithelial, connective, muscle? Epithelial connective tissue. All right. So this one, the epidermis, the top one, everyone, it's the epithelial tissue. Okay. The epidermis is made up of epithelial tissue. And then underneath it, what's the second layer of the skin? Dermis, right? And then what type of tissue is the dermis made up of? Connective tissue. And then underneath the dermis, what do we have? Hypodermis, which is not part of the skin, okay? But what type of tissue is it made up of? Adipose tissues, okay? So these sound familiar to us, right? Because when we're covering the tissues, I try to put those information in there too. So everyone, you can see the epidermis, the top layer. And then as you can see, the epidermis itself, it has different layers of the skin, all right, which makes the oh, I wanted to write something on the board. It's okay, I'll just type it out real quick. The epidermis, which is the top layer of the skin, it's made up of 5 different layers, which we're gonna learn. And then, did anybody watch the lecture on the integumentary system? Okay, so some people are. And then, do you remember a sentence that I say in the lecture? It's something silly, like no one would say that sentence to you, but it's a sentence that helps us remember the layers of the epidermis. Okay, we'll get there on the next slide, okay? And then if you haven't watched it, it's okay. Yes, yes. Okay, so wow, I can see who watched it. This is a really good way to tell who's watching and who's not watching. So we'll talk about that. There's a trick to remember, okay? That's all I'm gonna say. The epidermis is made up of different layers. If you look at it very closely, you'll see like there's layers here, like there's cells, like the cells here, the cells here, and then do you see the cells here, and the top cells all the way at the top, okay? So these are the different layers of epidermis. And then we have the dermis. Everyone, we said that the dermis is made up of connective tissue. And then remember, we said that in the dermis, like there's a lot going on, right? So let's go over and review and see what are those things that are found inside the dermis. Okay, what are those things that we have inside the dermis? So this is the dermis, and obviously it's made up of connective tissue. And then inside the dermis, like we said, we have these blood vessels. Do you see the blood vessels, right? The arteries and the veins. The arteries are going to be always drawn in red. The veins are going to be in blue. And then another thing that we have in the dermis is going to be these sensory receptors. Do you see those? right? These sensory receptors, and then that's how we feel pain, right? Our senses of our skin. And then speaking of sensory, here, do you see this part here? It's called the lamellated corpuscle. The lamellated corpuscle here, again, it's part of the nervous system. And the lamellated corpuscle, another name for it is Pacinian corpuscle, just in case if you see the other name other places. It's the same thing. And then basically it's for sensing deep touch or vibration. It's that type of feeling, okay? That's a type of sensing, sorry. That's a type of senses you can get, okay? Another thing is, look, do you see the hair here, right? And then this is gonna be the hair root, and then this is gonna be the hair bulb. From each hair bulb, you have a hair root, and then a hair comes out. The part where the hair comes out, it's called the hair shaft. And we'll talk about the hair when we get there. Okay, another thing about the hair is everyone, you know how like we have the hair on our skin, and then like we said, the root is in the dermis. Have you noticed like when we get goosebumps, the hair just like stand up, right? And then for the hair to do that, okay, it has these muscles here because the hairs won't stand up like that on their own, right? It has these muscles here called erector pili muscles. And then these erector pili muscles, whenever we get goosebumps, like you'll see your hair just standing, right? And then another thing about hairs, sometimes hairs, they get oily, right? So there must be a gland there that produces oil, right? That gland is called what? Sebaceous gland. Sebaceous gland produces oil, and look where it is. It's like right around the hair, right? So like after a while, it starts getting oily, right? Yeah, so this is a hair follicle. Look, one hair, and then how it comes out. We talked about blood vessels. Okay, what's another gland here? I think we saw this gland earlier. Sweat gland, right? We have it here, and then look how the sweat goes out the pore. We have a sweat pore on the epidermis. The sweat gland, it secretes sweat, right? And then remember we said that the sweat gland is found in the dermis, and then the dermis is made up of connective tissue, but the sweat gland itself is made up of epithelial tissue, right? It's the one with stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue, right? It's made up of epithelial tissue, but it's found in the dermis, which is made up of connective tissue, okay? And then these are like two details, but but it can help us just remember things, okay? And understand things better. Okay, I think we covered everything in the dermis, right? So how do you feel about the dermis and everything that we have in the second layer of the skin? Okay, another thing I wanted to cover is whatever we have the epidermis and the dermis, everyone, do you see these lines going up and down, up and down, up and down? Whenever we have something like this, it's called papillae. And then we're gonna see papillae other places too. And for example, like there's a part of our tongue, it's called papilla because if you like magnify it and zoom in, it goes up and down, but we don't see it like that right now just by looking at it, right? But that's what papilla mean. And then that papilla, it separates the epidermis from the dermis, okay? And then that papilla here is called the dermal papilla. Dermal because of the dermis, dermal because of the skin, right? Dermal papilla. It's the papilla that separates the epidermis from the dermis. All right. And then there is this picture in your handout if you would like to label it. Now that we went over everything, I think you should be able to label it, right? After we reviewed it together. All right, everyone, the next one is the structure of the epidermis. So remember here, right, this is this portion magnified. Remember we said that we have a dermal papilla. Do you remember the dermal papilla, everyone? This part going up and down, right? That separates the dermis from the epidermis, right? And then do you remember I said we have 5 layers of the skin of the epidermis, right? If you look at it, look at the cells here. And then as we go higher and higher and higher, the cells here are fresh, they're new cells. Some cells are still going through cell division and making more skin cells. And then as we go higher and higher, do you see how like the cells are dying, like aging, and then eventually dying, and then eventually it says sloughing keratinocytes, right? The dead cells are falling because there's new skin cells are being built, and then it gets built, and then it goes up, and then as it goes up, it ages, and then it dies, and then in the meantime, the new skin is coming, right? So these are the layers of the epidermis, okay? That top layer of the skin. We're not talking about the dermis. We're talking about the epidermis. And then each layer has a name, and then we have to know these names, okay? And the way that okay, I'm gonna try to do something here. Give me 1 second. Where's my mouse? I lost my mouse. Pointer options, nothing. How can I remove that? Okay, I have my mouse back. Let me. Okay. I'm gonna share this blank page. All right. So everyone, the sentence that I say in lecture that helps you remember the 5 layers of this epidermis. Who wants to say it? Who remembers what it is? Let's. Oh, wait, I'm not sharing what I want to share. Why am I not sharing that? Okay. Let's get sunburn. Okay, and everyone, the part that I want to highlight is the C for come, the L for let's, and then the G for get, and then the S from the sun and B from the burn. Okay, and then we're gonna name the 5 layers of the skin by each word, each first letter of each word. It tells us, it gives us a hint of what each layer is. Okay. By the way, all of them, they start with stratum. Okay, stratum. Okay, and I'm gonna start with the top one by looking at the image. What is the one that starts with C? Yes, it's stratum corneum. And then the second one, it should starts with L, stratum lucidum, right? The third one, it should start with G, right? What is it? Stratum granulosum, right? And then the next one is starts with S, stratum spinosum. And then what's the last one? It starts with B, stratum basali. All right. So everyone, the corneum is all the way at the top. Like corneum is where just they're already dead, they're coming off. And then basali is when new fresh skin cells are being made. And then we have this spinosum, you know, they're developing. Granulosum, they look good. And then as we go up, lucidum, corneum, they're aging, and then the corneum, they're already dying off. Okay. So what are the 5 layers of the epidermis? Stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, stratum basali. Okay? And then there is something special about the lucidum, everyone. For the lucidum is that we have 2 types of skin. We have a thick skin and we have a thin skin. Okay? Some places of the body, we have thicker skin. Some places we have a thinner skin. What's the difference between thick skin and the thin skin? The only difference is that the thick skin has these 5 layers. The thin skin only has 4 layers, and stratum lucidum is not one of them, okay? We don't have stratum lucidum when we have a thin skin, okay? When we have a thin skin, we don't have stratum lucidum, okay? That's gonna be the one missing, okay? If you want, go ahead and take a picture of this. Or I don't know if you typed it out. It's in the recording as well. All right, are we good? Okay. Okay, let's go back to our slides. All right. So everyone, what you're seeing here is, now I can't see it. Okay, I can see it now. So these are the 5 layers, okay? Come, let's get sunburn. And yeah, and then I just wanted to cover that laser. Okay, so the stratum basale, look here, we have keratinocytes, and then you can see we have dividing cells, new cells are being built. We have something called melanocytes. What are melanocytes? They produce melanin. Melanin, it gives the color, right? And then, by the way, everybody, they have the same amount of melanocyte in their bodies. The only thing that differs is how much melanin it produces, okay? For example, if it's more melanin, it's darker. If it's less melanin, it's more lighter or pale, okay? But everybody has the same number of melanocytes in their body. So yeah, stratum basale, spinosum, granulosum. Look, by the time you get lucidum, it's already age, and then corneum, it's dying off, okay? Next we have, next this slide, as you can see here, it's showing the thick and the thin skin. And then the one on the right is the thick skin, or we can see it here as well. The thick skin, and then it has the lucidum. And then on the next slide, we have the thin skin where it does not have the lucidum, okay? And then these are the layers. Basale, spinosum, granulosum, doesn't have lucidum, and spinosum all the way at the top. Any questions about the difference between thick and thin skin? All right, and then a little bit more in details about the dermis, everyone. So we know that this is the epidermis, right? And then we learned the 5 layers of the thick skin of the epidermis, right? And then if we don't have the lucidum, stratum lucidum, then it's a thin skin. Bless you. And then here, what did we call this papilla? Dermal papilla, right? And then here, once we've removed the epidermis, we have the dermis here, right? Everyone, the dermis is made up of, again, it has a papillary layer, okay? Because of the papilla shape, we call it papillary layer. And it has what layer? Reticular layer, okay? And then underneath that, we have our hypodermis, which is made up of fat cells. And then everyone, you can see how the dermis, it's made up of connective tissue, more specifically collagen fibers. And then do you see the blood vessels, capillaries? We have tactile corpuscle, lamellated corpuscle. These are like mechanoreceptors for more sensing deeper senses, vibrations, touch. It's for that stuff, okay? And then we can see some collagen fibers here. I mean, this is the cartoon image. Maybe we can see better here. Some collagen fibers under the microscope. Any questions about the dermis? All right, and then that's it, everyone. That's it for the anatomy of the skin. And then some accessory organs of the integumentary system. We have the hair and the nail. The hair, as you can see, and I mean, we did cover the hair. It's in the dermis. We have the dermal root here. And then you can see the hair shaft, and then this is the hair that sticks out. And then this is the erector pili muscle that gives us goosebumps. If you get a piece of hair, and then this is gonna sound funny because the hair is super thin, right? Like just hair, and then get a cross section of the hair, which is, it's already like you can barely hold it and see it. But if you look at it, it's made up of 3 layers. It's made up of the cuticle, the middle layer is the cortex, and the medulla, okay? For example, if we look at this hair here, this is a frontal section. We've like cut it open, and then you can see the hair bulb, which has the hair in it. And then this is the hair itself. And then you can see this outside layer is gonna be the cuticle, and then this middle layer is going to be the cortex, and then all the way in the middle, it's going to be the medulla, all right? And then here, obviously, we have our blood vessels, right, to get nutrients and oxygen to our cells here. And we have melanocyte, which gives us the hair color. Again, we all have the same amount of melanocytes. It just differs how much melanin we produce, darker or lighter, okay? Yeah. And then do you see how like this goes up and down? It's called hair papilla, okay? Like the papilla has that thing that it goes up and down, and we see the name different places. Next, we have the nail structure. I'm gonna magnify the top hair, the top nail, not the hair, okay? And then this is just basic, right? This is the body. This is the edge. It's not labeled here. The white part here, it's called the lunula. This skin here, it's called the eponychium. I think when you get manicure, they cut this skin when they clean it. I might be wrong, but I think that's what they do. And then here, we don't see it because it's hidden underneath the skin, is the nail root, okay? And then the next image, there's a cross section. We'll be able to see that, okay? This is a cross section of the nail, everyone. And then underneath the nail, you can still see the finger. Look, we have the epidermis, dermis, and then this yellow part is the adipose tissues, right? And then the nail itself, we have the free edge, we have the nail body, the lunula, the eponychium, and then we can see the nail root here, okay? And then that's it for the nail. And then one last thing that I wanted to cover, everyone, now that we are experts on the integumentary system, right? And then we understand like the first layer of the skin, second layer of the skin, right? All of us, we've heard how like, you know, like in movies, or hopefully just in movies, not in real life, like people experiencing, and then sometimes when they get a burn, they say, oh, don't worry, it's only a 1st-degree burn, you know, or they say it's really bad, it's 2nd-degree burn, or the person didn't make it, it's a 3rd-degree burn, right? So let's understand what is a 1st-degree, 2nd-degree, and 3rd-degree. Everyone, the 1st-degree, it affects only the epidermis, okay? You burn the epidermis, which is like the first 5 layers, but you have, remember, you have your stratum basale and all of that. You have new cells building, right? It takes a long time for that red to go away and all these cells to recover, right? But you can recover from 1st-degree, you know, with the appropriate treatment. 2nd-degree, it hits the epidermis and it reaches the dermis. It's more painful, way more painful, because we have more sensory receptors there. We have our blood vessels there, right? Like we're damaging more things, right? It's all the way down to the 2nd-degree, and it's way harder and a longer journey to recover from that. And that's the worst burn you can have. And then I say that because the 3rd-degree burn, some people don't make it. The 3rd-degree hits the epidermis, the dermis, and the adipose tissues underneath that. And then what did we say about the fat cells, the adipose tissues? They're there to protect our organs, right? So if it hit the adipose tissues, it might have hit the organs, and then if it hits an organ, and then that organ is not functioning anymore, and then some people, their life becomes life-threatening, right? It's life-threatening situation if they survive or not, because 3rd-degree burn It's literally reaches all the way to deeper tissues and organs, okay? The function of the skin is to protect us. It has layers, right? And it does protect us. And then I'm just sharing with you that now that we know everything we need to know about the skin, what do we mean by first, second, and third degree burns, okay? All right. So that's it for the integumentary system. Does anybody have any questions?